I'm sorry to keep you all waiting. We have a lot going on today, including litigation of the public's right to access to our affidavits and a search warrant on a very nasty capital murder case. So, who's first? I'm sorry, my name is Alex Gardner. It's Gardner, and I'm the DA.
Can you clarify exactly how much time LaMichael James might have to spend in jail, given the plea bargain?
I think it's likely that he will spend any more time in jail, unlikely that he will spend any more time in jail at all, assuming he's compliant with probation. When there's a sentence to the correctional authority, it's up to the sheriff's office to decide how that time is spent. And it's based on a number of considerations, but because of the nature of the offense and the fact that Mr. James represents a comparatively low risk, notwithstanding the amount of attention this is getting, suggests that he'll probably be in an alternative program of some kind.
Why did you guys go ahead and accept this change of plea? Did
you get the sentencing memorandum in the case?
We will in a minute.
Okay, let me... Thank you. So, let's find a good way to distribute these. I'll just kind of hand them out in thirds and keep one in case I need to make more copies. I didn't appreciate just how enthusiastic the press response was going to be. That's the first piece. This, which is the letter from the victim's counsel describing her position on this. And then this is the state's sentencing memorandum, which provides the detail of the state's explanation on the case. I'm sorry we didn't get those out sooner. As I said, it's been quite chaotic here.
So do you feel that justice was served?
Yes.
Why?
When we are trying to determine the appropriate result in a case like this, the first step is an investigation, which in an APA case, an assault, let me back up a little bit. There are protections in place in most communities around the United States which provide for mandatory arrest provisions in domestic assault cases. So if certain evidence exists on the first appraisal at the scene, the officers are required to make an arrest, and that's true in Oregon. That information was there. The arrest was appropriate under the circumstances. But investigation continues, and as they say, there is often another side to the story, and it took a while to develop the balance of the information in the case. When we're deciding what's appropriate, there are many considerations. The first is the nature of the conduct, whether it was intentional, how much injury or damage resulted, what the feelings of the victims are, the presence or absence of prior criminal history. All those things work into the mix, along with whether or not the person is prepared to accept responsibility, whether or not the injury, if any, can be repaired, and so forth. In this circumstance, it was clear that when the incident took place, Mr. James was initially responding in a way that he thought was measured and appropriate. But anybody who's been around for 20 or 30 years at least realizes the potential for turmoil to develop in a domestic relationship like this, and things went a little sideways. There were a lot of influences, and I think, in retrospect, everybody wishes that they had handled the situation a little bit better. We stood back and said, okay, how much injury, if any, was there? How does the victim feel about this in retrospect? Is Mr. James the sort of guy who's prepared to accept responsibility for what he did and move on? And is there a way to do that consistent with our overall structure? Frankly, in using jail space for a young man like Mr. James at this point, given the nature of the conduct, would have been a waste given the needs that we have in Lane County. So for those reasons and the wishes expressed by the victims in this case and other considerations, I think this is a very appropriate disposition. On the back of the state's sentencing memorandum, you have a copy of Mr. James' statement, and you'll see that it is an expression of responsibility and remorse, and it's time to move on. I think it's also important. There's a tremendous amount of tension. Obviously, here we are with several dozen people gathered to talk about what is, on our scale of criminal activity here, a comparatively minor event. It's worth noting that we've had about 600 criminal cases come into this office since this media enthusiasm erupted over the football cases. And if you put all of the football cases together in a lump, they are profoundly insignificant compared to the rapes and homicides and other things that are coming through the front door every day, which generate, I might add, about 5% of the media attention. So I'm just asking you all to keep this in perspective to the extent that that's possible.
Alex, in your capacity as district attorney, should LaMichael James be allowed to continue his football career at Oregon?
It's not my position to make judgments about football careers. I just make judgments about, to the extent that I'm capable, about what's appropriate in individual cases, in criminal cases, and how they should be disposed.
Alex, there are bound to be people in this community, some people who will say, well, they went easy on him because he's a football player. Is that true?
No, it's not true, and that's why we're making every effort to put all of the facts in front of the public. And at the point where the judge believes it's a reasonable disposition, and the DA thinks it's a reasonable disposition, and the victim's on board, and everybody who actually knows something about the case thinks it's a good disposition, I'm comfortable disregarding the opinions of people who know nothing about the case.
Alex, can you talk a little bit about the monitoring bracelet? It's gone now, and then what that means for contact with the victim?
Most cases which involve some violence or allegations of violence include a no-contact provision upon disposition. Very few of them have continuing monitoring for a number of reasons. That costs everybody. And so the potential sanctions for the defendant in a case like this, given all that he has at stake, I think are adequate to ensure that he won't have any contact. If he does have contact, then he'll be brought before the judge again, and he could be sentenced to a substantial period of time in jail. And obviously, you can imagine what the other potential consequences in his case might be.